It had to happen sometime. Nebraska drops first game of the 2024 season on a Friday night in the Big Ten opener against Illinois. The Huskers fall 31-24 in overtime, prolonging one of the most insane streaks in Nebraska football history, Bruntz. The Huskers haven't
Which
scored.
one? There are many.
Well, yeah, okay. So let's run through the things that have been prolonged here. Nebraska hasn't started 1-0 in conference play since 2019. 2019, they beat Illinois to start conference play before getting absolutely bullied on the football field by Ohio State.
Yes.
That sound about right? So, they haven't won a conference opener in years. They haven't scored or had a first down in overtime since 2014. The curse of Bo Pelini, some have called it. We've dedicated an entire podcast to this overtime futility. Didn't change on Friday night against Illinois. I didn't even introduce who we are. This is Husker247. If you don't know who's talking to you right now, I'm Mike Schaefer. If you don't know the other voice, that's Michael Bruntz. We're 2/3 of Husker247. And we are talking about futility as it so exists in terms of Nebraska football tonight. So awkward open transition, awkward game. Let's just continue along. Bruntz, Nebraska losers, 31-24 against Illinois, two ranked teams. I want to say this initially, and then I will leave you to go wherever you would like with it.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that Illinois was better than I thought they would be.
Mm-hmm.
I still feel like Nebraska should have won that game.
Mm-hmm.
And Nebraska got out-coached, outplayed, out-executed, out-disciplined. I don't know that there's any more outs. Nebraska's on the outs with that loss. The floor is yours. Take it anywhere you want to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think in totality, probably the most concerning part of that game to me was on the defensive side of the ball for Nebraska. You look at what Illinois was able to do throughout the game. I mean, I don't know that there ever really felt like a point in that game where Nebraska's defense exerted its will on Illinois' offense in any kind of way. Nebraska finished with 2 tackles for loss, which is usually a pretty good indication of which direction the line of scrimmage is moving when a play begins. Luke Altmaier throws 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, made some plays with his feet when he had to. Illinois just made some plays. I mean, the one-handed catch in the fourth quarter to kind of keep that drive going, or at least get it to manageable. I mean, that might have been the play of the game for Illinois, just with the way things were trending. But I mean, I think big picture wise, it's a little concerning the way that Nebraska was kind of bullied and pushed around and just out schemed. I mean, that was kind of the greatest hits, I feel like, of a Brett Bielema coach team. It's a lot of personnel mixing and matching. It's play action. It's tight ends. It should have looked fairly familiar to Nebraska fans. And they peppered in some RPO that really gave Nebraska some issues. And you kind of add all that up, and the numbers in the second half are not great for Nebraska. Illinois had the ball for over 18 minutes. They had 221 total yards in the second half. They ran for 129 after the half. Just, lots of things went Illinois' way in the second half that it felt like the game was just crying out for a defensive stop and to get Illinois off the field, and Nebraska just wasn't able to do that. And that to me is probably the most concerning piece of it, and a little bit surprising, because it just really seemed like Nebraska was on skates a lot in that game.
Yeah, I mean, we were walking out and sort of having the discussion that they didn't seem like they wanted to commit more than 4 rushers. Illinois spent like pretty much the entire game with 6 in protection for Altmaier, and yet they still had no problem finding open receivers. And so some of that is Nebraska plays kind of a soft coverage. Soft coverage is fine if you can get home with 4. If you can't get home with 4, you're just leaving it available. And then there were stretches in that game where Altmaier felt like he had the ball for like 8 seconds before he had to make a decision to throw it. or to take off and run. And so it just felt like Tony White and Nebraska's schematics were caught in between on what they wanted to do. And then I think a lot of credit just goes to Illinois for keeping Nebraska off balance. I mean, especially in the second half, late in the game, Nebraska seemed like they were playing Illinois to pass and Illinois would run. And then if they crept up to try to prevent against the run, then they were going to be thrown against. I just felt like they were never comfortable in that contest. What's fascinating and what I've forgotten about since the moment that it roughly happened, Nebraska stopped Illinois on that first drive in the second half. They had an opportunity up 17-10 to go move the ball, go put up points, and build their lead, and they promptly went 3 and out. And it's one of those things where they're not a good enough team at this point where they can kind of just take control of the game in that sense, especially one where you've got a pretty evenly matched contest. And I felt like these teams, again, I feel like Nebraska had the opportunity to win this game on the field and they failed. But for the most part, there's not a whole lot that separates them. I mean, you saw from the offensive performances, even defensively, I mean, Illinois played a little bit better, but they didn't play that much better on defense. It felt like when it came time to make plays, Illinois was able to do it with their defensive line in the overtime, and Nebraska just really wasn't able to do it at all throughout the game. And I think you're right. I mean, the 2 tackles for a loss is pretty concerning that they weren't able to at least get like 1 or 2 plays in the backfield with Illinois' running game. I'm not even really sure where Nebraska kind of goes trying to fix this going forward. I mean, you're going to get an entirely different looking Purdue team. And then, you get a very similar group in Rutgers here in 2 weeks. I mean, they're going to have to come up with some answers as to how to generate pressure if you can't do it with 4, or you're going to have to play coverage a little bit different. No, by the way, your best corner, Tommy Hill, his status is kind of in doubt for a while with plantar fasciitis, which doesn't feel like a 1-week injury.
Yeah, and it's the other piece of it that we saw on Friday night. I mean, the Nebraska's kind of self-inflicted penalties. Obviously, the referees in that one seem to be having a little bit of a challenging game. I think that's fair to say. However,
it is a Big Ten conference, so
it is. It's Nebraska needs to start bringing their own officials, I guess. The hard part was that Nebraska really kind of gifted Illinois yards in a couple of their scoring drives and kept things moving. And things that could have easily been avoided. And I'm just going through the stat column now. Illinois ran for 5 yards a carry in the second half, and just really kind of a steady drumbeat down the field against Nebraska. And that's probably the biggest, like I said, the biggest concern to me is what are the answers there? And I agree with you. I mean, I think unless you can get a lot more pressure from that front 4, you're going to have to start getting a little bit more exotic. And I know, the talk coming into Big Ten play was that Nebraska had improved the 4-man rush enough to where they could get home. And we didn't see that on Friday. And they're going to be seeing, I think they're going to be seeing a lot of teams that are going to be similar to Illinois. I mean, that Illinois team to me felt like perfectly built to win the old Big Ten West. Like that's the kind of team they've got. And Nebraska just really wasn't up to it tonight. I thought offensively, though, they, for the most part, played well enough to win. And I know there was some quibbling about things here and there. And, I think Nebraska would have loved to run the ball more than they did. But I thought offensively, Dylan Raiola gave them a chance.
Yeah, I mean, Dylan Raiola was fantastic. It's the only reason Nebraska was in that game. And he had some big-time throws. He had some big-time plays. And he got helped out by receivers making catches. I mean, Ja'Cory Barney had a great catch over the middle, and he got blown up. Jamal Banks had several really nice catches in critical situations to move the chains. And then Isaiah Nair drugged the foot on what was I don't know, Bruntz. Can you name another Nebraska quarterback you've ever seen play that could make that throw? It goes down statistically as an 11-yard touchdown pass.
Mm-hmm.
That does not do it justice as to
No.
what Dylan Raiola did right before halftime with a crossbody throw that the closest equivalent I have is being a shortstop in the hole without having time to get your foot down and just flinging it all arm to the short side of the pylon. And Isaiah Nair catches it, drags the toe. They get the touchdown. Passing game looked good at times. I thought honestly, I thought the offense was good enough on Friday night. I mean, I feel like they should have been able to win the game on that alone, and the defense and the special teams let them down. But it comes back to this too. You have that chance early in the second half, and you have your worst drive of the game. You go 3 and out. You went back 13 yards. Dylan had two plays on that drive where you basically the ball comes out sort of inexplicably, and they're able to recover it both times. But I just don't know. I'm mixing up drives. I think that happened when it was 24 all. Sorry, it's 1 a.m. Bear with me here. Still, they had the opportunity early in the second half to go move down the field and score and put pressure on Illinois, make them come back from a 10-point game, make them come back from a 2-touchdown game. And they couldn't do it. And that feels like a missed opportunity. And it's not the biggest thing that happened in this game, but it's one of those things where you got to get more than 7 points in the second half. You just have to. And they didn't. Oh, go ahead.
No, I said the drive you're talking about, it was the one where they went for 29 on the first play, then go 4-yard rush, 1-yard rush, incomplete.
That's right.
And then that was the one where Nebraska seemed poised to flip the field, but they gave up the 37-yard punt return, basically back to where they almost to midfield. So
yeah, on a missed punt. I mean, he hit it how he wanted to. He just kicked it directionally opposite of his coverage. It wasn't the disaster that was East Lansing, in 2021, but it wasn't a whole lot better in some ways. I want to just move past the offense because I feel like they played well enough. There's definitely some conversations in there. There's some concerns about what's happening up front. Turner Corcoran's out, and Gunnar Katula came in. I just want to dive into the special teams because I cannot get over how it's still bad. 2 years into Matt Rule, 7 years past Bo Pelini, or excuse me, what are we? 10 years past Bo Pelini, 7 years into this losing streak. You can't punt the ball without issues. You can't return kicks without issues. Your kickoff strategy, while it makes sense when explained, is executed relatively poorly and results in a large return that sets up field position. I don't get it, Bruntz. Like, I don't understand how they can continually be bad in the third phase of the game. And we talked about it's like in the offseason, like if they have these issues, it will cost them a game. For as bad as the defense played, I think special teams lost them this game tonight. I mean, the defense could have been better, but you had at least the opportunity to go up 27-24 if you can make a field goal there. You could have started with significantly better field position for your defense to make Illinois continue to drive. And they just didn't get it done in that phase. I'm just like dumbfounded. And even watching their coverage unit, they look slow. How many times did we turn to each other on punt returns for Illinois? And it's like, man, it seemed like they could have gotten more yards there. I just don't. I'm legitimately concerned more going forward about the special teams and how that could cost them again and again. Because if they play in these close games, those things really matter. And it feels like they're going to be playing in a lot of close games as we head throughout the rest of the season.
I was surprised. Would you believe that Nebraska actually won the field position battle in that game?
Well, they had the 2 takeaways. I mean, that helps.
But, yeah, I mean, 33 and 32. I wouldn't have guessed that, even with the turnovers.
Right.
It's a concern because I was asked this, I think, on one of the radio shows this week about, special teams wise, what's more like what's concerning, because it seemed like going into this game that the issues that they were having were not things that were being coached. It was more of like a personnel thing. You know what I mean?
Straight execution.
Yeah, and execution, and frankly, whether the guy can do it or not. And that's that's still a concern. You know, the coverage thing, it seemed like, mid game, there was kind of a shift of like, we're just going to bang the ball through the back of the end zone. I think that's probably a smart play for Nebraska going forward. And just kind of looking at replays, and I haven't gotten a chance to rewatch it yet, but it seemed like on punts, the gunners were getting held up or weren't getting that just seemed off. So yeah, I mean, it's for a team like Nebraska, which is still a very imperfect team, as most are, any kind of margin for error gets lost very quickly whenever you're not winning in that phase of the game. Or like, I don't even think you have to be exceptional there. I think you just need to be like a net like neutral type thing.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of what you're shooting for now. It'll be interesting to see what happens at that kicking spot. I mean, you had John Hole in there, tonight to make that, or to take that kick. He missed it. Tristan Alvano was listed as probable, and then obviously didn't kick after going through warmups. So that's a concern. I mean, for a team that's going to be playing a lot of close games, you just cannot afford to have that leg on the bar stool be letting you down. And I don't know what the easy answer is there, I guess. And that's concerning. I mean, it's kind of an obvious storyline, but I mean, you talk all summer about chasing three. It still looks like you're searching for it a little bit, just kind of based on how things went tonight and kind of how they had gone in the previous 3 games as well.
We didn't even mention this, and in some weeks it's been an issue with the snaps. This week, the hold, you didn't get the laces where they needed to be. Like, it's just there are all these like little compounding mistakes that add up and blow up in their face, and they're just not good enough to get past this. And those are the sort of reasons why Nebraska's been staying home in December instead of having the extra practices and going to, exotic places like Detroit and New York City in their open air press box. I know that you've been missing such opportunities, but it's, for all the different ways that it feels like this Nebraska program is better, a night like tonight feels way too similar to the Wisconsin game last year or the Maryland game or whatever you want to pick, where some coaching decisions and lack of execution, the inability to get off the field when you need to on defense. It just feels like Nebraska can't stay out of its own way in crunch time. And I don't know how they go about fixing that until they just do it.
Right.
Like, we can talk about it all you want. You can talk about being mentally ready and being physically tough and everything else. How many damn times are you going to lose when the game's on the line? You did it to Maryland, Wisconsin, Iowa, and now Illinois. 4 straight times in the fourth quarter. Michigan State, you can count that one too. They were chasing pretty much the whole second half. You couldn't get the stops. You couldn't get the right plays. It's one of those things where I don't know how they overcome it, but they're going to have to, because they're going to play in several more games like this.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, this is a program that, where it stands right now, you're still on the upslope. I mean, you're still trying to climb, and you can't be penalized 9 times for 89 yards. Like that's a lot to overcome for a program like Nebraska. You can't have the lapses on special teams that Nebraska's had. That's a lot for them to overcome. You can't have the kinds of blown assignments that leave guys wide open after a play action pass. Like those are things that are difficult to overcome. I mean, you put all those things together, and it's the movie you've seen for a while, where you just you're kind of just begging for somebody to make a play or two to help you overcome that stuff, and Nebraska just wasn't able to have that tonight. I mean, defensively, you needed somebody up front to win a one-on-one. You needed somebody to get a hand on a ball, or, you had it a couple times where you get a ball ripped out, or Sierra Wright, comes around the corner, makes a nice play, but you need a few more of those plays. I mean, you need you need that ball to go just a little bit, float a little less to Luke Lindenmeyer. I mean, that's kind of where this program's at right now is just such a thin margin. And, you got to be more dialed in than what they were tonight to beat a team. I mean, Illinois is a very veteran team too. I mean, Luke Altmaier has been through it. That's a team that, is going to make a few mistakes, but they largely are a veteran team that doesn't make a ton of them. So, Nebraska just kind of needed to stay out of its own way again, but that's kind of been the storyline for a number of years, and that's kind of what Matt Rule and his staff are trying to get past. They just haven't done it yet.
Yeah. Would it be fair to say that this isn't a bad loss because you lost to Illinois? It's a bad loss because you did all of the stuff that you've been trying to get past for years now?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be curious to see how it's kind of received in the walls over there because, I mean, being down on the field for the last 4 minutes of regulation, basically from when the kick was missed to the end of overtime, you could just feel the tension in the air of like everybody thinking in their heads, like, we know how this ends. We know where this goes. And that's a big burden to overcome. But I'm curious what it's going to be like over there, because you think back to the Michigan game last year where Nebraska was bullied and pushed around and really kind of just had their nose rubbed in it, for lack of a better metaphor. And they come out, they really kind of buckle down on Sunday. They have a really physical practice. I'm curious to see if this game is received in the same way as maybe that Michigan game was. Because I mean, Matt Rule said it tonight that he felt like, they were kind of pushed around at times, and that has not happened a lot since that Michigan game. And is it a good loss? I don't know. I mean, I think it's pretty disappointing because I think it felt like you were kind of making progress and maybe you backslid a little bit on whatever path you were on with how you played tonight.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to put it. All right. Well, plenty of coverage can be found at Husker247.com. We have game balls. We have report cards. We have conversation starters. We have comments from Matt Rule, Dylan Raiola, all the players. Everything you want and need can be found over there. The Sunday side session will go up on a Saturday morning. Michael Severe will be joining me for that. We'll have plenty of coverage through other things throughout the weekend as well. So be sure to get over to Husker247. Bruntz, any final thoughts?
No, I think we covered it.
We covered it, and you don't have to relive it if you don't want to, but we appreciate you joining us here at Husker247 for another post-game podcast. We'll be back with more podcast content throughout the week.